The year was 2347, and humanity had finally done what their ancestors had dreamed about for thousands of years. They had left their home system and traveled into the deep unknown regions of space. The exploration vessel USS Resolute was the pride of the United Earth Alliance. It carried 300 crew members and enough supplies to last 5 years in deep space. Captain Daniel Hayes stood on the bridge of his ship and looked at the stars through the main viewing screen. He had spent 20 years in the space fleet, and this was the mission he had waited for his entire life. Lieutenant Commander was his first officer. She was a tall woman with short brown hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had served with Daniel for 6 years, and there was no one he trusted more. On this particular morning, she walked onto the bridge with a cup of coffee in her hand and a strange look on her face. "Captain, we picked up something unusual during the night shift," she said. "The long-range sensors detected a signal coming from the Andromeda corridor. It is not natural. Someone made it." Daniel felt his heart beat faster. This was the moment every explorer dreamed about. First contact with an alien species. He tried to keep his voice calm as he gave the order to change course toward the signal source. The crew worked with quiet excitement as the ship turned and began its journey toward whatever was waiting for them in the darkness. It took them 3 days to reach the source of the signal. What they found was beyond anything they had imagined. A massive space station hung in the void between stars. It was at least 50 kilometers long and covered with strange symbols and blinking lights. Smaller ships moved around it like insects around a hive. Daniel counted at least 200 vessels of various sizes. "Open a communication channel," he ordered. "Let them know we come in peace." The response came within minutes. A face appeared on the main screen that made several crew members step back in shock. The being was in nature. It had a triangular head with large compound eyes that reflected the light in disturbing patterns. Its mouth was a collection of moving parts that clicked and scraped against each other as it spoke. The universal translator worked hard to convert the sounds into words that humans could understand. "I am ambassador of the Dominion. You have entered space that belongs to us. Identify yourselves and state your purpose." Daniel stood straight and spoke clearly. "I am Captain Daniel Hayes of the United Earth Alliance. We are explorers from a planet called Earth. We detected your signal and came to make peaceful contact. We mean you no harm, and we hope to establish friendly relations between our species." They made a sound that the translator identified as laughter. It was a cold and unpleasant sound. "Earth, we have heard of your little world. Our scouts observed your species many cycles ago. You were still fighting wars with primitive weapons and burning dead plants to power your machines. You have advanced quickly, too quickly perhaps." More appeared on the screen behind the ambassador. They clicked and chittered among themselves in a way that made Daniel uncomfortable. He had the feeling that they were discussing something important. "The Dominion has ruled this region of space for 12,000 of your years," continued. "We have conquered 63 species and brought them under our control. This is the natural order of things. The strong rule and the weak serve. Your species is new to the stars and you do not understand how things work out here, but you will learn." Stepped closer to Daniel and whispered, "Captain, I am detecting energy signatures from those ships. They are powering up weapons." Daniel raised his hand slightly to acknowledge her warning but kept his eyes on the screen. "Ambassador, we did not come here to fight. We came to talk and learn and perhaps trade knowledge with your people. Surely there is room in this galaxy for both of our species to exist in peace." The compound eyes seemed to focus more intently on Daniel. "You do not understand, human. There is no negotiation. There is no compromise. Your species has two choices. You will submit to the Dominion and serve us as all inferior species must serve, or you will be destroyed. We will give you one of your hours to decide." The screen went dark. Daniel looked around at his crew. He saw fear on some faces but also determination on others. Communications Officer Marshall was working at his station with steady hands. Chief Engineer was already running calculations on his tablet. These were good people. They deserved better than this. Spoke quietly, "What do we do, Captain?" Daniel thought about Earth. He thought about his wife waiting for him back home. He thought about his daughter who had just started school. He thought about all the people on his ship who had families of their own. And then he thought about what it would mean to surrender, to become slaves to these arrogant creatures who believed they had the right to own other beings. "Open a channel," he said. When appeared on screen again, Daniel spoke with a voice that did not shake. "Ambassador, I have considered your offer. On behalf of the human race, I respectfully decline. We will not be your servants. We will not bow to any species that threatens us with destruction for refusing to give up our freedom. If you want to rule humanity, you will have to earn that right." They stared at him for a long moment. "You are either very brave or very foolish, human. Your species will learn the cost of defiance." The screen went dark again. Seconds later, the ship shook violently as weapons fire struck the hull. Alarms screamed throughout the vessel. Crew members were thrown from their seats. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. Marshall was working at his station when an explosion ripped through the bridge. Without thinking, he threw himself over 3 junior officers who had fallen near an overloading power conduit. The conduit exploded and took the full force of the blast. He died instantly, but the 3 young officers he protected survived. Daniel grabbed the arms of his chair and shouted orders. "All hands battle stations. Return fire. Get us out of here." The USS Resolute was outnumbered, but Chief Engineer was a genius at his job. He pushed the engines beyond their limits and found power in systems that should have been empty, coordinated the defense teams with cold efficiency, and somehow, against all odds, the Resolute escaped. They limped back toward Earth space with 47 dead crew members and a hull that was barely holding together. But they also carried something else. They carried detailed scans of technology. They carried recordings of every word the ambassador had spoken, and they carried a burning anger that would not fade. They had just made the biggest mistake in the history of their 12,000-year empire. They had given humanity a reason to fight. The USS Resolute arrived at Earth space looking like a wounded animal. The hull was covered with burn marks and holes. Entire sections had been sealed off because they were open to the vacuum of space. Emergency repair teams had worked without sleep for days just to keep the ship moving. When they finally entered orbit around Earth, medical ships rushed to meet them and take the wounded to proper hospitals. Captain Daniel Hayes stood before the United Earth Alliance Council 3 days later. The council chamber was a massive room with seats arranged in a half circle around a central platform. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat in those seats. They had come to hear what Daniel had to say about the first contact with alien life. Daniel told them everything. He told them about the Dominion and their massive space station. He told them about Ambassador and his demands for human surrender. He told them about the attack and the 47 crew members who died. He told them about Marshall, who gave his life to save 3 young officers. When he finished speaking, the chamber was silent. Then a voice called out from the upper seats, "What do you recommend, Captain Hayes?" Daniel looked up at the council members. His face was tired, but his eyes were clear. "They gave us a choice between slavery and death. I chose neither. Now they will come for Earth because I them. They will bring their warships and their armies, and they will try to make us pay for my decision. So I recommend that we do not wait for them to come. I recommend that we prepare for war and then we take the fight to them." The council debated for 3 days. Some members argued for diplomacy. Perhaps they could send another ship with gifts and apologies. Perhaps they could be convinced to leave humanity alone, but others pointed out that they had conquered 63 species. They did not want peace. They wanted obedience. In the end, the council voted unanimously for war. Admiral Cole was given command of the newly formed 1st Expeditionary Fleet. She was 52 years old with gray hair that she kept cut short, and a face that showed the marks of a difficult life. She had fought in the Martian conflicts 20 years ago and she had never lost a battle. More importantly, she understood something that many people did not. War was not about killing your enemies. War was about breaking their will to fight. The United Earth Alliance threw everything into the war effort. Factories that once made civilian vehicles now produced warships. Scientists worked around the clock to study the technology that the Resolute had captured. Engineers found ways to improve upon alien designs and make them work with human systems. Within 18 months, humanity had built 200 warships that were faster and more maneuverable than anything they had ever seen. Chief Engineer led the team that reverse-engineered the shield technology. He spent months studying the captured data and running simulations. When he finally cracked the code, he did not simply copy what they had made. He improved it. Human shields were now 30% more efficient than the alien originals. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Brandon Price was doing work that was just as important. He was an intelligence officer stationed at a listening post near the edge of explored space. His job was to intercept communications and learn everything he could about the enemy. What he discovered changed the entire nature of the coming war. The Dominion was not as strong as it appeared. Yes, they had 10,000 warships. Yes, they had conquered dozens of species, but those conquered species were not loyal subjects. They were slaves who hated their masters, the ruled through fear and violence. They crushed any sign of resistance with brutal force, but resistance never truly died. It just went underground and waited for the right moment. Brandon brought his findings to Admiral Cole personally. He showed her intercepted messages from resistance groups on occupied worlds. He showed her maps of supply lines and the locations of their most important military bases. And he showed her something else. A list of species who had fought against the Dominion and lost. Species who might be willing to fight again if they had help. Studied the data for hours. When she finally looked up at Brandon, there was a spark in her eyes that had not been there before. "They think they are fighting one species," she said. "They have no idea what they started." The first human attack came 6 months later. A small fleet of 20 ships jumped into a supply depot and destroyed everything they found. They were gone before reinforcements could arrive. 2 weeks later, another attack hit a communications relay station. Then another struck a fuel storage facility. And another. And another. They could not understand what was happening. Their enemies had always fought in predictable ways. They formed battle lines and charged at each other until one side was destroyed. But humans did not fight like that. They appeared from nowhere. They struck hard and fast. They vanished before anyone could respond. And they targeted infrastructure instead of warships. Captain Mitchell became a legend during this phase of the war. He commanded the USS Sentinel, a fast attack ship with a crew of only 40 people. His specialty was finding creative ways to cause maximum damage with minimal resources. His most famous operation involved 3 nuclear warheads attached to asteroid fragments. He used them to destroy an entire communications hub that was protected by 50 warships. His ship escaped without a scratch. Back on Earth, people followed the news of the war with growing hope. They had seemed invincible at first, but now they were losing ships and stations, and their mighty empire was showing cracks. Humans began to believe that they could actually win this war. Admiral Cole knew better. The attacks were successful, but they were not enough. The Dominion still had thousands of warships. Humanity had hundreds. In a straight fight, they would lose. She needed allies. That was when she called Lieutenant Commander Griffin into her office. Was a special operations officer who had trained with the best soldiers on Earth. She spoke 4 human languages and had a gift for learning new ones quickly. She was also one of the bravest people had ever met. "I have a mission for you," the Admiral said. "A dangerous one. You will take a small team to a world called 4. According to our intelligence, there is a resistance movement there that has been fighting for 300 years. I need you to make contact with them. I need you to convince them that we can help each other." Did not hesitate. When do I leave? Tomorrow, and if you succeed, you might just change the course of this war. Nodded and left to prepare her team. She did not know it yet, but she was about to do exactly what the Admiral predicted. She was about to give the galaxy something it had not seen in a very long time. She was about to give it hope. The planet 4 was a beautiful world covered with thick forests and deep blue oceans. From space it looked peaceful and untouched, but Lieutenant Commander Griffin knew that appearances could deceive. This world had been under occupation for 3 centuries. The native had been forced into labor camps, and their cities had been turned into military bases. Most of the galaxy believed that they had been completely broken, and her team of 6 soldiers landed their small shuttle in a remote forest clearing. They had spent weeks studying culture and learning the basics of their language. They knew that the resistance fighters were suspicious of outsiders. One wrong move could get them killed before they even had a chance to explain why they were here. The wait lasted 3 days, and her team made camp and sent out signals on frequencies that their intelligence suggested the resistance might monitor. They ate their rations and slept in shifts and tried not to think about what would happen if they found them first. On the 3rd night they came. They emerged from the trees like ghosts, counted at least 20 of them before she stopped counting. They were reptilian beings with scaled skin that shifted colors depending on their mood. Right now most of them were showing deep red, which meant they were ready for violence. They carried weapons that looked old but well-maintained, and their eyes were filled with centuries of pain and hatred. Stood slowly and raised her empty hands. She spoke in careful, "We are humans. We come from a world called Earth. We are fighting thee, and we wish to speak with your leaders." The largest stepped forward. His scales were covered with scars and his left eye was missing. When he spoke, his voice was rough like stones grinding together. I lead what remains of the resistance. Why should we believe anything a soft-skinned stranger tells us?" Reached into her pocket slowly and pulled out a small device. She activated it, and a holographic display appeared in the air between them. It showed footage of human warships attacking stations. It showed the explosion of the communications hub that Captain Mitchell had destroyed. It showed ships burning in the cold darkness of space. "Because we are killing them," said simply, "and we want to help you do the same." Watched the footage without expression. When it ended, he turned to the other and spoke in rapid words that could not follow. There was clearly disagreement among them. Some wanted to trust the humans. Others thought it was a trap. The argument went on for several minutes. Finally raised his hand and the others fell silent. He looked at with his single remaining eye. "They have promised us peace before. They have promised us freedom before. They lied every time. Why should humans be different?" Took a deep breath. "Because we do not want to conquer you. We do not want to rule you. We want to stand beside you as equals and drive thee out of this sector forever. When the war is over, 4 will belong to thee again. You have my word." The word of one soldier means nothing. "Then let me give you more than words. Let me give you weapons. Let me give you ships. Let me give you the chance to take back your world." Was silent for a long moment. Then slowly, almost painfully, the red color of his scales began to fade. It was replaced by a soft green that knew meant cautious hope. "Come," he said, "we have much to discuss." Over the following weeks, lived among the resistance. She shared their food and slept in their hidden caves and listened to their stories. She learned about the day that came 300 years ago. She learned about the millions who died in the conquest. She learned about the generations who had been born into slavery and never known freedom. And she told them about humanity. She told them about Earth and its long history of war and peace. She told them about the Resolute and Captain Hayes and the 47 crew members who died. She told them about Admiral Cole and the fleet that was being built. And she told them about the fundamental belief that drove humans forward, that no one had the right to own another thinking being. When the first shipment of weapons arrived, they wept. Not from sadness, but from something they had almost forgotten how to feel. They wept because, after 3 centuries, someone had finally come to help them. The uprising began on a night when both of the planet's moons were dark. Fighters attacked outposts across the world simultaneously. They used tactics that had taught them combined with knowledge of the terrain that only natives could possess. By morning, half of the bases on the planet had been destroyed. But 4 was just the beginning. Word spread across the Dominion like fire through dry grass. The humans were not just fighting for themselves. They were fighting to free the conquered. They were offering weapons and training and hope to anyone who would stand against the were next. They were a species of tall, thin beings with 4 arms and minds that could process information faster than any computer. They had used them as slaves in their shipyards, forcing them to build the very weapons that kept them imprisoned. When human agents made contact, they did not just join the rebellion. They sabotaged every ship they could reach before escaping to join the human fleet. Then came They were small, fierce warriors who had been used as shock troops by the Dominion. They had been destroyed during the original conquest, and they had nothing left to lose. They threw themselves into the fight with a fury that impressed even the most hardened human soldiers. Within a year, the rebellion had spread to 17 occupied worlds. The military was forced to divert ships from the front lines to deal with internal uprisings. Their supply lines were being cut faster than they could repair them. And for the first time in 12,000 years, the slaves were fighting back with real success. Admiral Cole received reports from and her growing network of allies with quiet satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place. The thought they were fighting a war against one young species from a small blue planet. They had no idea that they were facing something far more dangerous. They were facing an idea. The idea that freedom was worth fighting for. The idea that no empire built on slavery could last forever. The idea that when beings of different species stood together against tyranny, even the mightiest oppressors could fall. And ideas, new, were impossible to kill. High Lord Ron stood in the command center of and stared at the reports that his officers had brought him. He had ruled the Dominion for 200 years. He had crushed rebellions on 30 worlds. He had ordered the deaths of billions and never felt a moment of doubt. But now, for the first time in his long life, he felt something that might have been fear. The humans were winning. It seemed impossible. They were a young species who had only discovered faster-than-light travel a few decades ago. They had no experience with galactic warfare. They should have been easy prey for the ancient and powerful Dominion, but instead they were tearing his empire apart piece by piece. His advisors tried to explain what was happening. They spoke of human adaptability and creativity. They spoke of unusual tactics that commanders could not predict or counter. They spoke of the rebellion spreading across occupied worlds and the supply lines that were being cut every day. But Ron did not want explanations. He wanted solutions. "Enough," he said finally, his voice cutting through the nervous chatter of his officers. "We have been treating these humans like a minor threat. That ends now. I am ordering the Grand Armada to assemble, every warship we have, every soldier we can spare. We will go to there and we will burn it to ash. When Earth is nothing but a dead rock floating in space, the other species will learn what happens to those who defy us." The Grand Armada took 3 months to assemble. 15,000 warships gathered at the edge of space. It was the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. Ron himself took command from the bridge of his flagship, a massive vessel that was larger than most space stations. He was confident that nothing could stand against such overwhelming power. Admiral Cole knew the attack was coming. Her intelligence network had been tracking the assembly of the fleet for weeks. She knew the numbers. She knew she was by a factor of almost 20 to 1, and she knew that this battle would decide the fate of humanity. She gathered her commanders in the war room of her flagship USS Vengeance. Captain Daniel Hayes was there, now commanding his own warship after the Resolute was repaired and upgraded. Captain Mitchell sat beside him with a calm expression that hid a mind constantly calculating angles and possibilities. Lieutenant Commander Griffin had returned from Four to coordinate with the allied species. "They are coming with everything they have," said. 15,000 ships, the largest armada in history. They expect to find us cowering behind our planetary defenses, waiting to die." She smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "They are going to be disappointed." The Battle of Sol began on a Tuesday morning by Earth time. The fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel just beyond the orbit of Neptune. Ron expected to see a handful of human ships fleeing toward there. Instead, he found himself facing a wall of metal and fire. Humanity had been busy. While they were assembling their grand armada, humans had been building ships at a pace that should have been impossible. They had converted civilian vessels into warships. They had armed cargo haulers and passenger liners. They had pulled ships from every corner of human space. The fleet that faced the numbered nearly 1,000 vessels. It was still not enough. "All ships, this is Admiral Cole. Hold the line. Make them pay for every kilometer they advance. Help is coming." They attacked with the confidence of a species that had never known real defeat. Their ships surged forward in overwhelming waves. Human vessels exploded under the sheer weight of firepower being directed at them. But for every human ship that died, it took 3 or 4 with it. Commander Tyler Brooks led a squadron of bomber ships directly into the heart of the formation. His mission was suicide, and he knew it. His target was the command ship where High Lord Ron directed the battle. Tyler had volunteered for this mission because he had lost his entire family when they destroyed a civilian transport 6 months ago. His last transmission was simple: for Earth, for everyone. The explosion that followed destroyed the command ship and 14 vessels around it. Ron survived only because he had been moved to a secondary command center minutes before the attack, but the damage was done. Coordination was thrown into chaos. Captain Foster held the defensive line at the moons of Jupiter for 16 hours. Her ship was the last one standing when reinforcements finally arrived. Her hull was more patch than metal. Half her crew was dead or wounded, but she never gave the order to retreat. The reinforcements came from beyond the edges of the solar system. Dreadnoughts jumped into the battle zone first. They were old ships that had been hidden for centuries, finally brought back to fighting condition with human help. Behind them came cruisers, ships that the slaves had been building in secret for years. And then the fighters arrived in numbers that blotted out the stars. Ron watched in disbelief as his grand armada was suddenly caught between 2 forces, the humans in front and the allied species behind. His tactical displays turned red with warnings. Ships were being destroyed faster than his officers could track. The carefully planned attack had become a desperate fight for survival. "All ships retreat," he ordered finally. "Fall back to space." But retreating was not as simple as giving an order. Human and allied ships pursued the fleeing with relentless determination. They did not allow the enemy to regroup or organize. They harassed them every step of the way. Of the 15,000 ships that made up the Grand Armada, fewer than 4,000 made it back to territory. The rest were destroyed or captured. It was the worst military defeat in the 12,000-year history of the Dominion. On Earth, people gathered in the streets to celebrate. They had survived. They had won. But Admiral Cole did not celebrate. She looked at the reports of casualties and felt the weight of every life that had been lost. Tyler Brooks and his entire bomber squadron. Hundreds of other crews who had fought and died so that humanity could live. She turned to her officers with a grim expression. "This is not over. We have broken their armada, but their empire still stands. We will give them no time to recover, plot a course for space. We are going to end this war." The hunt began. The journey to space took 3 weeks. Admiral Cole used that time to reorganize her fleet and integrate the Allied forces into a unified command structure, and officers worked alongside their human counterparts. It was not always easy. There were language barriers and cultural misunderstandings and old suspicions that took time to overcome. But they were united by something stronger than their differences. They were united by a common enemy and a shared dream of freedom. Behind the fleet came a wave of liberation. Every world that had been under control rose up when they heard the news of the Grand Armada's defeat. Slave populations that had been kept down for centuries suddenly found the courage to fight. Garrisons were overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Supply depots were seized. Communications networks were destroyed. The dominion that had seemed so powerful was collapsing from the inside out. High Lord Ron watched the reports from his bunker on the with growing horror. His empire was dying. Species that had served the Dominion for thousands of years were turning against their masters. His own officers were beginning to whisper about surrender, and the human fleet was getting closer every day. He tried to rally his remaining forces. He broadcast speeches about superiority and the shame of defeat. He ordered executions for any officer who spoke of surrender. He promised rewards for anyone who could stop the human advance, but nothing worked. The tide had turned and there was no way to turn it back. The final battle was fought in orbit around Prime. It was not really a battle at all. The remaining ships were outnumbered and demoralized. Many of them surrendered without firing a shot. Others tried to flee and were hunted down by fighters who had waited centuries for this moment. When it was over, Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the USS Vengeance and looked down at her fleet surrounded the planet in a ring of steel. Their weapons were charged and ready. One order from her and the world below could be turned into a lifeless wasteland. Captain Daniel Hayes stood beside her. He had been there at the beginning when the Resolute first encountered He had watched Marshall die protecting junior officers. He had spent years fighting to reach this moment. Now he waited to see what would do with the victory they had earned. "We could end them," she said quietly. "Glass their world, destroy their species completely. After everything they have done, no one would blame us." Daniel nodded slowly. "No one would blame us," he agreed. "But is that who we want to be?" Was silent for a long moment. She thought about all the people who had died in this war. She thought about the families who would never see their loved ones again. She thought about Tyler Brooks flying his ship into the heart of the enemy fleet. She thought about the letter she had received from Marshall's widow asking her to make his death mean something. She opened a communication channel. High Lord Ron appeared on the screen. He looked old and broken. The arrogance that had marked every previous encounter was gone. In its place was the face of a being who knew that his world was about to end. "I offer unconditional surrender," he said. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Do with us what you will." Studied him for a long moment. Then she spoke in a voice that carried across the bridge and throughout the ship. "Your surrender is accepted, but I want more than surrender. I want the galaxy to understand something." She turned to her communications officer. "Open a channel to every ship in the fleet and broadcast this on every frequency we can reach. I want everyone to hear this." When the light indicated that she was broadcasting, began to speak. "This is Admiral Cole of the United Earth Alliance. I am speaking to every species in this galaxy. Today the Dominion has surrendered. Their empire is finished. The species they enslaved are free." She paused to let those words sink in. 2 years ago, they attacked a human exploration ship without provocation. They murdered our people. They demanded our surrender. They threatened our extinction. They believed that humanity would be easy prey like all the other species they had conquered. Her voice grew harder. "They were wrong." She looked directly at the screen where Ron was watching. "We did not just fight for ourselves. We fought for the who had been enslaved for 3 centuries. We fought for the who were forced to build the weapons of their oppressors. We fought for the whose was destroyed. We fought for every species that has ever suffered under tyranny." She stood. "To all species listening, hear this clearly. Humanity comes in peace to those who offer peace. We will trade with you. We will learn from you. We will share what we know. We will stand beside you against any threat that rises. You will find no better friends than humans." Her eyes narrowed. "But hear this warning as well. Attack humanity, harm our people, threaten our existence, and we will hunt you across every star system in this galaxy. We will tear down your empires brick by brick. We will free every species you have enslaved. We will not stop until the very memory of your civilization becomes a cautionary tale told to frighten children." She pointed at the image of Ron. "They learned this lesson the hard way. They attacked us, and we destroyed everything they built. Now their grand empire is nothing but ash and memories. Let their fate be a warning to anyone else who thinks they can prey upon the weak or threaten the innocent." Her final words rang out across the galaxy. "We are human, we protect our own. We stand with those who need us, and we never ever forget. This is not a threat. This is a promise, and humanity keeps its promises." The broadcast ended, closed her eyes for a moment, and let out a long breath. When she opened them again, Daniel was looking at her with something like pride. "That was a good speech," he said. "It was not a speech," she replied. "It was the truth." In the centuries that followed, many species would test the warning that Cole had given. None of them succeeded, and in the great archives of 1,000 worlds, teachers would tell their students about the day humanity announced itself to the stars. The day the galaxy learned what it meant to attack the apes from Earth. And the warning echoed across the galaxy for 10,000 years.